Hey, good morning, everybody. Hope y'all made it through yesterday's last sessions. Okay, it was an hour and a half, and we did a lot of basic stuff yesterday. Talked about a lot of the basics, and really, I know some of you guys probably could go to sleep on that part. But I want to start out this morning talking about something before we get back in. I just want to review some of these horror stories because I think the more y'all see that kind of stuff, it just makes you more familiar with our world and what we see a lot more than what you guys would see, because we're doing a large volume of surveys where we see just such a big variety of crazy things. And I think it's helpful for you guys to see some of this to kind of picture how you might handle some of these issues. Most of them, I would say, just run. That might be the best thing to do. But behind me today, I added a new backdrop that I've been told that y'all cannot see. But what this is, it's actually, let's get it squared up. Surveyor's supposed to have it squared up and plumb. Sorry. But anyway, what that is behind me, you guys, is a framed picture of a project we've worked on a lot since 2001. It's actually the Heritage Golf Club, and it's in Tucker, Georgia. And we've worked on this thing for a long time. Really, it started before 2001. I think this one's dated 2001. But I'm pretty sure we started even before that. So over the years, they've asked us to update this commercial piece, and it's actually a 27-hole golf course. And so this is actually, it's in two plats, and this is actually one that's the 9 holes that's across the street from the main course where the clubhouse is and all that. So they've hired us one more time. We're in the process of working on it now. Actually, they sent us another big fat retainer check, and we're actually working on this thing again, all over again for them. There's a new owner, and it's had probably, since we've been working on it, that I know of, at least 3 owners. One of them, in fact, you guys, not that long ago, Jay-Z owned it, the entertainer. In fact, they were talking about Jay-Z on the news this morning, and I told her, yeah, I was going to talk about him this morning in my class. So anyway, he was one of the owners not that long ago, and actually, managing a golf course wasn't really his thing, because it actually it got run down. Apparently, I heard that the course was in really bad shape for a number of years, and even they lost their liquor license for a while. They mismanaged the liquor and the taxes and all that, so they lost their liquor license, is what I understood. But anyway, but yeah, there's a new owner now, and it's in pretty good shape. It's got 27 holes total. Mike and I, my partner, got to play it, and they actually let us play it for free the other day because we were working on the course. So we actually played and worked at the same time. We just were looking over the course to see what was notably different things that we could spot out on the course that had changed since we had originally done it. And so, hey, honey, can we get a free round of golf? If anybody out there likes to play golf, if y'all want to play golf, can I say that? I'll get in trouble. Well, if Stewart doesn't want to pick up that, McClung Surveying can. So if anybody out there plays golf and y'all want to play with 2 golfers that are not really great, but we're good, good enough to have fun, just let us know, because it's a cool course if you want to play it. But anyway, so this is a commercial piece, and like I said, and it's actually, it's going to have different characteristics to the legal description that may have changed from the original deeds when they first bought this piece. And I know that was one of the questions that they had from yesterday. They wanted to know how these legal descriptions can vary over time, or how the bearings might differ and the actually dimensions might change from the original warranty deed to the current, deeds, or deeds from from a plat, actually, that's been produced by a current survey. And so what a lot of this is you guys, if you've got a really old deed, it may have been produced using an older technology. It might have been something where they rotated all their bearings. The surveyor who was working on that property had rotated all the bearings based off of some other work that they'd done next door or close by, and they just tied all their control points to that set of bearings. And so the main thing is, even though the bearings may vary a little bit, and they shouldn't vary that much, you might have a degree or 2 variance, and I've had one actually that varied by, I think it was like 8 degrees between us and a plat that Georgia Land had done years ago, and I had a hard time explaining that to the attorney, that it was the exact same piece of property and they just didn't quite get it that it's a magnetic north reading, or they had, some survey company had scaled it off of the GIS tax maps, And so one of the two ways is how they can get that. So you can have one surveyor go out there and actually shoot a bearing on a property line, and then that same day another surveyor come out there and shoot a bearing, and he gets a different take or read on that same property line. As long as you're using those same two pins, that's not going to change that property line, because what really controls is when you do a boundary survey, you're showing bearings and distances all the way around it, and what's really controlling not so much as those bearings or those coordinates, but it's the angles created between those bearings. In other words, so the surveyor will always go and check the bearings and then check those angles as well to make sure they're matching with another surveyor or another set of bearings. One thing to also keep in mind, you guys, sometimes these bearings can change because you have magnetic north versus a grid north, which is something that would be tied to state plane coordinates. And so any new plats that are recorded today, you guys, they want them tied to state plane coordinates. And you're not going to have that on these older surveys or older properties. They just, or subdivisions, you're definitely just not going to have that same type of oversight within the county for recording plats. Today, even Cobb County, they're real lax on most anything, but they want everything that's recorded tied to state plane coordinates. And that way, everything's tied to the same coordinate list, basically. In other words, so you won't have an assumed bearing somewhere or a magnetic north that would fluctuate from one surveyor to another. And so keep in mind, it's the angle between those two property lines that's got to stay consistent. And anytime you've got one that you're not sure about and you're going, well, wait a minute, why is this thing 4 degrees difference than the other one that we'd had, or the previous legal we had, and then now the surveyor's coming in radically different. So you can always email it to us, and that's just part of the free support that we offer for you guys. All you got to do is call my office and say, hey, I sat through that stupid class at just for 3 hours, and y'all owe me, okay? And I'll come in, step in, and just, hey, we'll run it up on our computer and check it for you. We'll check it. And if it's a real small one, we won't charge anything. But if it's a real big piece of property, I would have to charge a little bit, just for our computer time. But normally we can give you some support like that when you need it, or just give you an opinion on what we're looking at. So keep that in mind. But yeah, these legal descriptions will vary a little bit from surveyor to surveyor, and that's the reason why, unless that surveyor that's doing a new survey is actually looking at a legal description that a previous survey had done, and they've said, okay, we're going to use that same set of bearings to rotate all of our distances and our bearings off of that one bearing. So they'll tie to a common property line and rotate everything to that. So if anybody has any more questions about that, feel free to ask me, okay? But yeah, this is something that you see a lot of in commercial. In commercial surveys, keep in mind, they're done the same as far as the property measurements and what the surveyor out in the field would do. Pretty much the same, unless there's more involvement in the field surveyor locating utilities. They go a little bit, a little bit deeper, trying to find the utilities sometimes on some of these commercial ones, because sometimes they're just trickier to locate things that are underground for us. So it is possible on occasion that, you bring in a subsurface locator, and that's something that, we have to bring in and talk to the client about in advance. If there's a property that just has multiple pipes and easements going across it where there's no above ground structures for us to locate, then what we need to do is bring in it's called a subsurface locator that will come in and use specialized equipment, cameras, and special detection devices to be able to locate pipes and, various things that might be buried underground. We don't like to call for that, but sometimes we just need to. But also, one thing about commercial, anytime you're dealing, most of you guys are going to know this, but anytime for those of you that don't close a lot of commercial, the first thing you want to always ask is, if you're all of a sudden doing a commercial project and the lender or the title insurance company is going to ask for a survey, you want to always be on top of this and just ask real quick, do you want an ALTA or a non-ALTA survey? And the biggest difference is, the biggest difference aside from the cost, an ALTA survey is more expensive, but the biggest difference I would say is when you're having to do the legal description actually on the survey. That's part of it. You have to actually type it out, put it on the survey. You have to put this certification that really nails the surveyor down, and it actually gives them, you know, sometimes it can make them a little bit more leery of doing these alpha surveys with a certification like that, because it really holds them more accountable to anything that might go wrong or future, or anything that could be an error of sorts on the survey. So it's a pretty strong certification that makes us more legally liable for that survey. Okay, and keep in mind we're legally liable for them for 6 years. A lot of people don't realize that, and maybe some people, I know for a fact some people think we're legally liable for them forever, and that's kind of scary. And it's a good thing we're not, because I mean there's already a shortage of surveyors in Georgia. Some of you may know that, but a lot of you don't. There's actually a shortage of surveyors in Georgia, and there's so few of us coming up. In fact, I think there was only 2 people last year, 2 people in the whole state that went out and tried to get their license to be a surveyor, and so and one of them works for me. So they're dying a lot faster than they're being created, basically. So we're kind of concerned about that. So anyway, just keep that in mind. If you have any kids, know of anybody that wants to get out there and get started in a pretty good career path, I think in the future, I think it'll probably pay a lot better. It's not a real high-paying job for the most part, just because most people don't do a big volume of these things. And a surveyor is typically going to make about 20% profit on a survey, 20%. And so if you look at it and really, you know, kind of measure out the liability and the risk that they take on, and the profit that they make on it, it's just not a real good business model to make a ton of money. And so that might be one of the reasons why there's not a lot of people getting into it. But anyway, just feel free to reach out to us, and if you have any kids, or you know, high school kids or college kids, I guess I should say, that really want to, you know, try working out in the field to just see if they like it, let us know. I mean, we're always looking for new talent that we can train, and we're willing to train people from their early 20s, you know. But that's usually how people get started in it. They work for a survey company for a while, and then they'll eventually decide what they want to do, if they want to stay in it or not. But it's great for the person that likes to be outside. They don't want to be in an office all day. But anyway, do we have Bruce and Brian on today?
Yes, they're both there.
Hey guys, do y'all want to add anything to what I was talking about as far as the legal description and how it sometimes might vary a little bit from one surveyor to the next, or sometimes it could be, I'm working on one now, you guys, that actually varied by quite a bit. I think it was like on one line, it was 5 feet on now this was a residential property, but it was one we just worked on this week, and also, last week as well. But it's actually varying by 5 feet, and that's due to what we assumed was a right-of-way change. But one thing's for sure is keep in mind, the surveyor is only locating what's on the ground. So he's showing what's on the ground in field conditions for the pins that he finds, and he compares it to the legal description that he's pulled, but he doesn't do a full title search. So if there are things that y'all find in doing your title search, things like right-of-way changes or easements, you know, gas line easements, this particular one had an easement, Georgia pipeline, the Colonial pipeline gas easement on it, going across it. And the client was just freaked out that it was going across his property, and so he actually had to contact the Colonial pipeline people to get them to actually locate that line and see if we can kind of pinpoint how far it is away from his house, a little more exact, because we were only able to locate it from the recorded plat, because we didn't have anything in the field to actually indicate exactly where those pipes were. So I think they're going to come out there and actually locate the pipes underground, and then we're hoping that they'll actually stake their easement, and then we'll go back and revise the survey.
Hey, good morning, Jeff. This is Bruce.
Hey, Bruce. Morning.
How are you today? Good?
Yeah, pretty good. You want to play some golf? You want to play golf?
I'm not much of a golfer, unfortunately.
No, you're not. Well, I'm not either, but that didn't stop me.
Yeah, not my strong suit. Hey, one thing I thought I would add on this.
Okay.
A lot of times, from the title perspective, what we get, especially in commercial transactions, is, you know, sometimes we request, can we insure the surveyor's legal description, or do we need to insure the historic legal description? Because often in commercial transactions, what happens is by contract, by warranty deed or limited, they can only convey by limited warranty deed the historic legal description. The question comes up, okay, can we insure that? Or can we also insure the surveyor's new legal description? And from the title perspective, what we want to see, if we're going to insure the new surveyor's legal description, is typically a separate quitclaim deed for the surveyor's legal description. And if it's, of course, if it's on the mortgage instrument, we would like to see the surveyor's legal description added to the mortgage instrument. And then on the other surveys, you know, we certainly like to see a statement from the surveyor indicating that it is the same property. That way it takes, you know, the burden away from the agent of trying to make that determination. So that's one thing we try to look for when we're asked to ensure the new legal description from the surveyor.
So how often, Bruce, do you see large variations between one surveyor and another on the same common property line?
I wouldn't say large variations. I would say it's more, you know, smaller type variations, but you'll often see some, you know, slight variations in those.
Right, right. One thing to also look for, you guys, on these surveys is when you're looking for that, and that's something that you're, you know, concerned about, make sure you kind of focus in on what was found on the ground. In other words, like the one I'm looking at right now, the one what's up on the screen, on y'all's screen, look at the bottom right-hand corner. What does that say? What are we looking at there? Y'all see that? It says this would be the southeast corner of that property, the front right corner of that property we're looking at. Now this is residential, of course, but so what are we looking at? We're looking at a 1/2-inch crimp top pipe. Okay, that's actually a monument, and that tells us something right there. That means that this was probably set somewhere between 1920 and 1960. Okay, that's, I mean, because surveyors haven't used those since that time period. These monuments, that means that was an original corner, probably set by that survey company that was laying this thing out originally, you know, all those years ago. And so we look at that and kind of weigh that out, you know, to say, okay, this was an original corner, it appears, you know, because just because we find a pin doesn't mean it's in the right place. And so if you look at the northeast corner of on that same property line in the back, you see there's another crimp top found. Then we measured across down that back line and we found a 1/2-inch rebar. And we verified, you know, on this plat, according to that lot 3, apparently it was supposed to be 25.3, if I can read that on my screen. It's kind of small. But anyway, and then in the front, we found on the front, it would be the front left corner of that same property, we've got a 1/2-inch rebar. Now, the rebars were set probably from 70s on up, you know, to the current day. That's what we still use today is rebar, reinforcement rod is what that is. You've all seen rebar pins, you just didn't know you were looking at them. Every time you go by a big construction site that's being worked on and you see them fixing to pour that concrete, right before they pour that concrete, they'll put in these rebar, huge, you know, stretches of rebar. It's metal rods, basically, is all it is, and that's reinforcement for the concrete that they're going to pour around it. A rebar for a pin for a surveyor is the exact same thing. They cut it up into small links. Usually they're around, you know, not quite 2 feet long, but they're longer than what you might think. You just don't see it all. Most of it's driven in the ground. So we also look at the type of monument or pin that we're finding, and sometimes you weigh that in too, is to see if that was what the original surveyor or the original engineer had laid out. But it's still just got to be verified, you know. But we do see the technology is improving the accuracy of these things so much better than it was even 30 years ago, you guys. If you see a survey that was done in, say, maybe the 90s or the 80s, they just really weren't done as well as they are today, you know, because they keep, you know, increasing our standards to where we have to keep doing more and more on these surveys, and the technology made them a lot more accurate, but darn sure not faster. They're just more accurate. Does anybody have any questions though about that? Okay. One thing that we did. Well, okay.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes.
Brian Pierce here.
Hey, Brian.
Doing all right today?
Yeah, doing pretty good.
Good, good. Listen, quick question. Can you go over how sometimes the degrees or minutes of a survey kind of changes over time. We've noticed, you know, when you're doing a survey back in, 10 years ago, that some of the calls can vary, by the Earth's movement or something. Can you kind of cover that real quick?
Right. That is magnetic north, you guys, does fluctuate. Okay, and so that can fluctuate. Actually, I haven't really talked about this or read this. It's been a long time since I actually studied that, but I remember, best I recall, it can fluctuate by as much as 1.5 degrees, something in that range. I'd have to double check with Mike on that one. But yeah, it does fluctuate somewhat. So that's why magnetic north, you guys, is not used anymore for any current recorded documents. In other words, so if it's a recorded document like a plat, a survey plat for either a subdivision or even if it's a commercial tract, it doesn't matter. But if you're having a commercial tract of land and it's going to go through the county, zoning and development and site plan people, all those people have got to actually sign off on it. One of the things is it's got to go, one department's got to go through is the GIS department, okay? And they're going to look at that before they assign it an address, and before they record it, they want to have it be coordinated with their grid system to where everything's plugged into the same set of control monuments, or control points based on state plane coordinates. So a lot of these surveys that we do are just based off of assumed, bearings or other deeds that we have found for adjoining properties. And so, but keep that in mind. You can always look at the survey, you guys, and actually see at the top, like this one behind me. Actually, that's something I just realized we're probably going to have to change. This survey that we were just talking about of the Heritage Golf Course, I just looked behind me and I noticed the north arrow on it, okay? The north arrow says magnetic north. That's not going to be good. This thing is going through an engineering company called Planners and Engineering. They're actually doing the site development before this construction is going to take place on this golf course, and no problem to rotate these bearings and revise it to state plane coordinates. So anything current is going to be tied to state plane coordinates. I would say anything, if you're looking at plats and you actually see a plat, look up at the top and find that north arrow and see if it says grid north or does it say magnetic north. Anyway, that's something to kind of look for. But yeah, they've got a lot more oversight and a lot more control over how they want these plats done and created by the survey companies today. And luckily, we just bought, let's see, I guess it was yesterday, about $20,000 worth of equipment to help do that in office, a lot quicker and more efficient. Yeah, that equipment is expensive. That GPS equipment's really expensive. And we felt like we were getting a bargain at $20,000. It started at 40. All right, so let's go back to this one, and we can answer more questions as we go. Does anybody else want to comment? Karen, has anybody got their hand up?
No hands.
No hands. Okay. We'll have some coffee. Let's get some hands going, you guys. Okay. We need some rowdy people out there. Okay. We want questions. We want to talk about it, debate. We can debate it if you want to. Speaking of those, I talked a minute ago about these pins that we find in the field, the different type of monuments we find in the field, whether it be an open top pipe, it could be a crimp top. The open top pipes is another pin that they used even before they started doing crimp top. So open top pipes are even older. Okay, so if we're working, say for an example, if we're doing some survey work in Ainsley Park. Okay, Ainsley Park was actually, the recorded plat was 1902. That's where the original governor's mansion was. In 1902, you guys, they actually said open top pipes. And so when we're working in that area of Atlanta, well, first off, we're scared to death because there's just underground pipes everywhere, sewer pipes with no easements, but they're all over the place. So we're afraid we're going to miss something that's underground that we don't even, have any clue, any evidence of above ground structures that is even there. But so we have to dig into get these sewer maps from the city of Atlanta and really rely on those somewhat. Also, we're looking in the field to see if we can find manholes hidden somewhere that, you just don't normally naturally see in the middle of the street, because some of these lines are running through the middle of the lots. So, but anyway, so going back to the pins, we actually, on one survey that we did, we actually found a guy that we felt like after doing a 2-day survey on this piece of property, a residential piece of property in Dunwoody, and it was a $1.2 million deal, okay? So it was a pretty fancy house. And so what we had found is that the recorded plat and what was on the ground, the pins that were on the ground were 17 feet off in the back, 17 feet. And so we started really expanding out our survey, and we surveyed all total, you guys. So, I mean, a lot of times y'all think we're just surveying one lot. Well, to create this one in a platform that we felt good about, we'd release to the client, we had to go back and survey probably a total of, I don't know, maybe it was 7 lots. And I actually used this, Mike and I used this in a state bar presentation we did downtown one time, probably about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago maybe. But anyway, it was pretty unusual that you see something 17 feet off, but we kept looking at it and tying in pins, and we put this whole end of the subdivision together. We laid out all these lots and tied in multiple pins. We found out different types of pins, and this was an older plat. It was originally done probably back in I think it was done in the 70s. Wasn't that old, but it was old enough to where, they didn't have good control on it, or good control points and, bearings like we see today on the more current plats. I think it had angles on it, best I remember. But anyway, come to find out, after we really studied it, you guys, we figured out how those pins got there and how it was 17 feet off in the back. What was our first clue was that the pins weren't anywhere near the right-of-way in the front, okay? Nowhere near where the right-of-way would be. If a 50-foot right-of-way, you should be 25 feet out of the center line of the road, right? Because it's 50-foot total width. So if you pulled 35 feet, you'd have the pin in the front. So it was like almost 10 feet, not quite 10 feet, but it was close to 10 feet in the front off from the road right-of-way. The one in the back was about, I don't know, 10 or 12 feet off. And then we noticed that the neighbor had this poured concrete wall, about I don't know, at least a $50,000 wall. Let me tell you, it was huge. And once you put this wall in using those pins, you could kind of tell that it was pretty suspicious that something wasn't right. And this is what we've and we're just assuming here, that this neighbor, guy to the left of this property, had actually just decided he needed to expand his backyard, because his backyard was incredible, but and it was only so nice, that nice because he made it a lot bigger, but with this extra 17 feet in the back. So we kind of felt like the whole time is that this guy had actually put the pins in himself and tried to just expand his backyard, and he thought he'd gotten away with it, I guess. But anyway, that was actually a deal killer. These people that were buying that home just walked. They said, look, we're not buying into a lawsuit, and they walked away. So if any of you guys want a copy of that, I can give you copies of how all that mapped out, how that looked from our worksheets to our final survey. It's a pretty interesting little example of how crazy some of the stuff is that we see, But
hey,
yeah, I'm pretty sure he moved those pins.
How often do you see that?
We don't see them where they actually move the pins that often. It does happen from time to time, but I mean, not that much. That's the biggest one I've ever seen that I could say, okay, well, evidence points all towards the neighbor here, because no surveyor could set those pins like that. No surveyor would set a pin, off the right of way that far, and no surveyor would set the back line off from the back established property line for the subdivision and could set it off like that. So even if a surveyor had a few drinks before he came to work that day, he still could not screw it up that bad. I mean, just it's not really possible. So the only thing that really made sense is that somebody actually moved the pins and tried to get away with it.
Interesting.
And it's probably, I bet it's with some title insurance company. I bet that's a claim right now. It's still ongoing right now. All right, so let's go back to our little example here of just go through the horror stories. All right, so did anybody figure out what's wrong with this picture and why this one had to take a $70,000 hit in order to sell it? And why did they have to, we're assuming they had to get a cash buyer on this one. And it was under contract 3 times.
Anybody? If you're able to unmute yourself, you can chime in.
Yeah.
That storm sewer looks like an issue.
There you go. Storm sewer problem. Yeah. Under the house. Yeah. And what had happened was that you couldn't see it on the ground. There was no evidence that it was even there. I was actually the one that kind of stirred this up because I was actually, my partner checks most of the surveys, you guys. Does all the hard work. I get pretty easy. But so he was off that day or something, whatever it was, I had to chip in and help. And I was looking at this 1950s recorded plat. In fact, I think it was 1950 exactly, was the year that this recorded plat was recorded in Fulton County. And so I'm looking at it and I saw a faint line. It was one of those black copies with the white lines. And it just wasn't in the best shape. You know, it just was kind of hard to read. So I had to get my magnifying glass. And I saw this single dash line cutting across that lot, exactly where we show this blue line on this one. And the plat, recorded plat, said storm sewer. That's all it said, storm sewer. And it had that little faint dash line across it. So we had to show it, you know, on our survey, even though, you know, you could easily miss it doing a title search on something like this. So, we showed it, and the people flipped out. I mean, they just were throwing us under the bus, you know, saying they were crazy as heck and we shouldn't have shown that, you know, why do we show that, all this. And actually the seller of this property, you guys, was a friend of one of our clients, an attorney that works in Buckhead. And so he was calling me saying, hey, what, is there anything I can do to help with this one, Jeff? And so they finally, we, you know, gave them the numbers to call to go down to the city of Atlanta and see if they could, you know, get them to kind of send their team out there to see if they could prove whether it was there or not, you know, and they actually did. Usually the city of Atlanta won't even do that, but this lady, this real estate agent kept calling to where they finally just said, you know, hey, let's shut her up. Let's send somebody out there and we'll see. Well, they actually found a structure over on the top left-hand side of the page. You see lot 5? They found a drop inlet on that lot over there. And so they started dumping a bunch of water in it and they put a blue dye in it, okay? And then they went back into the neighbor's yard over on lot 3. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, all this water comes bubbling up with the blue dye out of the ground right there where we showed it. And so the city verified, listen, that old 1950s plat shows that old storm sewer, not a sanitary sewer, but a storm sewer line there for a reason because they said it's there, you know, and so they validated our survey. So it's just one of those things. And so the seller, all of a sudden, you know, he didn't want to spend any money on this. And he, you know, we kept saying, well, why don't you move the storm sewer line over and just put it down your property line and see if you can get an easement from lot number 3. And it took a few days of talking about that and us kind of really talking that up, thinking, oh, that would help. I could fix it, you know. And finally he confessed to us. He said, look, me and that guy over there on lot 3, we don't like each other. We don't even talk. Been a long time since we talked. I sure couldn't go over there and have my hand out asking for an easement. He said that is not going to happen. So what did happen is he took a $70,000 hit, and it took him quite a while to sell this property. So anyway, note to self, you know, get the survey before you go to closing and make sure you know what you're buying. All right, now here's one that's interesting, you guys. What do y'all see wrong with this one? Now this is a cluster home. This is see, everybody thinks, you know, this, if you got new construction, heck, what could go wrong? The city or the county's inspected it, right? You know, and they got the CO. It's all good. What could go wrong on a brand new cluster home development? Okay, so this one was the result of a lady sitting in my class. She was a Caldwell Banker agent at the time. Now she's with Berkshire Hathaway. No, excuse me, Atlanta Fine Homes in Marietta. And so she went through my class, sat through that 3-hour class, and you know what she said? She said, when I was left out of there, I told myself, I said, I'm never going to be one of Jeff's examples. I'm not going to let that happen to me. And then she was. In fact, it's kind of funny. She actually was in another class about a year or two later, and she said, yeah, that's my survey. But what she was bragging about was the fact that she saved her clients because of this. And she said, look, she made sure she protected her clients, got this survey from us. And lo and behold, this brand new cluster home had the house over the property line by 2.9 feet. And what she did is she saved her clients. And so she's pretty proud of herself for this. So she got, you know, she got a lot of praise for, you know, taking care of her clients. So that was pretty neat. But yeah, what they had to do was they had to actually buy property. You guys, they had to turn around. They just closed on lot 38. Lot 38, see that where the structure is encroaching onto it? They had to actually buy property from her and attach it to lot 39. Has anybody got a guess how much they had to pay for that? Are we take care? And do we have anything to give away today to get it right?
We always have things to give away.
I think well, never mind. I got
But
in trouble
isn't
for
the
that
answer way more than they wanted to pay for it?
Okay, let's go with that. I don't even know the answer. I don't know. So we'll go with that one, Karen. Okay, there's way more. Moving on. Now here's one on the opposite end of the spectrum. I think this one, we were talking about Ansley Park earlier. I think this is in Ansley Park. And this one is very interesting, you guys, because this shows you, this is a great example of how the surveyor and the title attorney have to work hand in hand. In other words, so what had happened previously on this transaction, for the current owner, they went to closing, did not have a survey. And so this is why you need these surveys to look at closing to make sure you know what you're getting, because what they conveyed at the closing, you guys, showed just this. Let me highlight these things. All right, so all the seller owned was this in red. That's all the current owner had owned, currently owned, was this portion in red. And the closing attorney, they didn't have a document to look at to show where the improvements were, so they just conveyed what the title searcher had shown them that was available per their title search. Well, what they missed was this part in yellow was conveyed in a separate deed. And you can see we listed the deed book and pages here. So you can tell 38-198, was it 127? No, 327. And then the other deed was at 31-981. And so what they had done on this one is just they missed this other little parcel of land because somebody had found it years ago apparently and had fixed it by acquiring this other piece of land. And they were supposed to go together, but the closing attorney on this, the current owner that was trying to sell it now, just didn't pick up on it. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So what did they do? Anybody got a suggestion? Well, what they did was they tracked down the guy that still owned the part in yellow. He was still around, and he was very nice apparently because he actually signed that over. He actually cooperated with the attorney, the new closing attorney, trying to get this property closed. And so, yeah, so that was kind of tidied up by just, getting a deed for that piece to the current owner. And they were willing to help out and do that. They didn't even want any money. That was pretty good. And they intended to sell it to begin with, so they were being honest. So if you look at this survey though, you guys, I see some other things on here that are pretty serious. Like you got a major fence encroachment here of the neighbor's fence over on the south property line. It's also got the AC unit that's over, well, it goes right through the middle of that thing. And then I see one more problem here, looks pretty serious, is you see a shared concrete drive. What's missing there? What's missing is deed book and page showing how it's shared. So it's just assuming, hey, neighbor's good with the way it's there and we'll both use it. No, I don't think that's a good, clean way of going forward with that. It needs to be some kind of a joint driveway agreement, I would think, secured on that to just protect both owners of that. So yeah, this one was a kind of a crazy looking survey, but this is surveying in the old parts of Atlanta. Oh, let's go back to that real quick, you guys. One thing that a lot of attorneys maybe don't realize is that when you're surveying a property like this, okay, and I'm thinking, best I remember, it was Ansley Park. It might have been Garden Hills. It might have been one. It was one of those two. But what's missing and what's different from these old properties, that was done or recorded back in the early 1900s was angles or bearings. So what you're going to have is just distances for a lot like this, only distances. And then for a survey company to come in and try to, follow in the original footsteps for that original, surveyor, it's kind of hard sometimes without an angle or a bearing to tell, which angle are you coming off the road? What angle is that in the back? So what we're having to do is try to find the original monuments the best we can, and a lot of times what it really comes down to is you're surveying multiple lots on some of these. You're surveying up and down the street to find pins and lines of possession and tie it all down. So they're a lot more involved in a property like this. And this is why I say, surveying in these older type of developments or older properties like this, it's really surveying's both an art and a science. And a lot of people don't realize that. I think it's just all science. Well, I'm sorry. What is that?
That might not have been intentional.
Oh, okay. Oh, we had a quick question there. Darn it. There's one question. Okay, but anyway, but keep that in mind, that the surveyor is going to need more time on some of these surveys. Sometimes it takes them twice as long to do a survey in an old part of town like this as it would a survey that's basically tied down with some good angles and bearings on a recorded plat that you can just go to and say, okay, well, this pin's wrong, or these pins aren't in at all, and we can build it back to the way it was. The original intent of that recorded plat is this, based on the angles and based on the distances. You can put that together, but missing angles or bearings, it makes these things pretty tricky. That's where, the art part of the surveying comes in. Okay, that just takes years of experience. All right, here's one's kind of interesting, you guys. This poor lady had already had this house under contract. She had another house in Florida under contract, and she was all teed up with back-to-back closings until the survey comes in. And this was such a neat piece of property because, I don't know if you can see with all these improvements on here, she just built everything she'd ever seen. It looked like on HGTV. It looked like she built it on this lot. And it was just a beautiful piece of property, old house, probably built in the 20s. It's an old cottage-style house. But it had a pond in the front. It had 2 more ponds in the back spilling into a little waterfall area, a little pond, one pond going into the other. And then it even had a chicken coop back in the back of the property that had, she had something back there we'd never seen before in surveying. She had designer chickens. Had no clue there was such a thing. And we actually went online and started looking at all these different designer chickens. Did y'all know you could pay $1,000 for certain chickens? I did not know that. That'd have to be like a golden egg. Pay that much money for a chicken. But they were really pretty. They were beautiful, but she had this really fancy chicken coop back there, so we had to locate it. Normally, surveyors would not locate a chicken coop. But yeah, and then so she gets the survey back, or the buyer gets the survey back. And so I'll never forget this email that I was sent by the closing attorney. The closing attorney sent me this email saying, unfortunately, he had to explain to Mr. Howard, the buyer, that even though he was buying his dream home, he would not be able to obtain a loan for this property. And that was it. He could pay cash for it, but they wouldn't, couldn't get clear title insurance for the lender, so they couldn't, they couldn't close this thing. And so the guy, Mr. Howard, was pretty heartbroken over that. And then also the lady that was trying to sell it was heartbroken because here she was ready to sell and move on, go to Florida, and it canceled her other deal that she'd had under contract. So it was a pretty bad situation. And really, if you think about it, she really could have known about this if she had just, had to survey before she even closed on it. But what they finally told her is that, look, about the only thing you can do here is either move the sewer line or she could, sell it to a cash buyer. That was really her 2 best options. Oh, wait a minute, there's a 3rd option. She could just make it a forever rental house. And as you know, none of those are really good options, but that's about all she could do because that's a pretty serious deal. And you could move a sewer line sometimes. A sewer line like this, it was an 8-inch line, and that could be relocated probably. But you're talking about probably a year's worth of work probably to get it before it gets engineered. You'd have to have a survey and topo showing the trees out there, showing the topography, and then an engineering company would have to come in and redesign how the elevations would work for that sewer line, and they'd tie into the existing sewer that's back here in the back. So there's ways to fix that, but it could take quite some time to do it, and you're talking about anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000. Okay, and that's on a typical 8-inch sewer line. We actually had one. It was $1 million house over in the Mornington area. I think that's the name of that subdivision. It was off Beverly Drive, and that was a lawsuit. And so what happened on that one, you guys, was something that looked very similar to this, and went right up under an old, I think, a nice-looking house. But according to the area it was in, that not-so-nice house was under contract for $1 million. Okay, and the seller had already had a custom house built by John Willis Homes, not John Whelan, John Willis. John Willis builds these Mac Daddy, you know, $1 million plus homes, and he just about gotten it finished, and so they had it all synced up together to where he would get his property sold or close on it, and then he was closing on his new house that he'd had custom built by John Willis. And so anyway, so we found this sewer line under the house, and we first discovered it because, you know, there was no sign that it was even there initially until we finally, you could barely see it out in the street. There was this old manhole that's kind of partially covered, but we found it, and we opened up that manhole, and what we found, you guys, was pretty shocking. It was what you call a trunk line, and it was probably, best I remember, it was like a 36 or 42-inch pipe, and crap was just flying through it. I mean, it was like a major sewer line, and it was not like an 8-inch line. So the point is that there's a big difference in these sewer pipes that you could see, and this one was a major trunk line going right up under that house. And so one thing's for sure, this was $1 million house. Well, it might cost more than that to move a pipe like that. So that really is not even feasible to even try to move a pipe like that. It ain't moving. So keep that in mind. That you know, there's different types of pipes that could be under there, and there's different remedies to, you know, fix things like that. But I wouldn't think you could move that one probably at all. I don't think the city would let you do it. You know, just because where's all that crap going? You know, for the 2 days it takes to transfer the pipe, or, you know, whatever time it takes to get it, you know, hooked up from one to the other, plus the size and scale of a project like that. You know, I don't remember the depth of it, but that would be a major undertaking that I just don't think anybody would want to take. So probably what they had to do on that one, we don't know, because it did go through a lawsuit. In fact, he sued everybody in the world. In fact, my partner wound up being called in to testify against the other survey company that didn't locate it. They missed it, and nobody's perfect. You know, anybody can miss something like that. But what he missed was something pretty obvious, was that manhole out in the street. He should have seen it. I mean, we saw it. I mean, it was kind of slightly covered up or hard to see, but we found it, and he could have done the same. But anyway, so we see stuff like this. Let me tell you, this right here, this example is something we see maybe not every week, but maybe every other week, something like that. We actually have a guy in my office that works for us, and his sister had a property on Northside Drive, and this just came up about a month ago, where she had a 30-inch drainage pipe going right up under her house, and didn't know about it or didn't disclose it. New buyer came along, and they realized that 30-inch pipe was there, and they found out they couldn't get a mortgage, and so they walked on that deal. And it was an $800,000 house, and they're devastated. These people had planned on moving on. They were ready to move on, and they thought they had the house sold and thought it was a done deal. And now they're trying to figure out how to fix it, and there's no real good way to fix this one either. It's just going to take pouring some money into it. And they're in a situation where they're probably going to need to either a cash deal, you know, find a cash buyer. In fact, that's what the attorney recommended to them. After reviewing it all and looking at it, they just said, look, you just need to find a cash buyer. I mean, that could be a $100,000 hit for sure, maybe more, you know. I wouldn't want to buy it. All right, moving on. All right, I'm going to make somebody tell me what's wrong with this one, or not make you, but suggest maybe somebody chime in and see what they see wrong with this one. This one's pretty interesting, you guys, because actually the lady that owned this house worked for a real estate closing attorney that you all know. I can tell you right now, y'all know this guy, or you've seen him, you know, around, heard his name, because he's been in the business for, I mean, I've known him for 25 or 30 years, I guess. He used to live over close to our office. In fact, it was kind of scary for me because I'm showing this example. My partner and I are at our state bar presentation that we did, you know, earlier, that I talked about earlier, and you know, after our presentation, all of a sudden this attorney runs up to Mike and I as we're leaving, and he rushes up to me. I'm scared to death. He said, that was my secretary you were talking about there. And he actually said, oh, no, you're good. You didn't say anything wrong, you know, because I was like scared to death. He used to be mad at me. He said, no, you did good. You didn't say anything wrong. But what do y'all see here? What's wrong with this picture? remember our little thing from yesterday for those of you that don't read a lot of surveys? People like George, I mean, you can look at this probably like that. I mean, you know what's wrong here. But, so, all right, well, I'm going to show you. Nobody's answering. All right, so this was a short sale, and and it was panic time because that's what they owned was lot 15. It was 2 acres. Okay, so and that's all the bank owned, and that's all the bank could sell them. When you pulled up the GIS county tax records, guess what? They showed these red solid lines going all the way back to a lake. There was a lake back here, and it appeared that she was buying. That kind of got cut off over here on the left-hand side, but it was supposed to be a total of 5 acres. It was 2.99 something acres or 2.98 acres, almost a total of 5 acres. And so that's what she thought, and that's what was fenced in. You can see the fences going all the way back, but it went all the way back to the lake, and she just assumed she was getting 5 acres. Well, the deed, come to find out, the deed that she took title to was of lot 15, showing 2 acres. You can see that on there. So she was like devastated, you know, finding out that all this time, you know, she thought she owned a really cool house with a pool and, you know, all this stuff built around it. And come to find out, what she bought at closing was a nice asphalt driveway and part of a carport, you know. And so she was like just flipping out. So anyway, once we did the, you know, kind of looking at it and working with the title insurance company, we found out, yeah, David Barber, see him over here on the left now or formerly, he was not friendly. Going back to our not friendly thing from yesterday, David Barber was not very friendly about it. In fact, what he finally ultimately did, the only thing Andy, oh, did I say that? Sorry. Almost said his full name there. Okay, we'll go with that, but I'm going to leave that alone. Anyway, the attorney that actually, you know, this lady worked for, he actually, you know, told me, he said, look, that guy wouldn't even sell her the property going all the way back to the lake. All he would do is sell her a piece going somewhere behind the pool. And that was it. And so I don't know what he was doing with that other piece of property because it was landlocked unless he owned, I don't know if David Barber owned the property to the north. According to the deeds, he didn't own a piece. So it was kind of landlocked. So anyway, but yeah, it was kind of, you know, shocking to see something like this where, you know, you all of a sudden find out you don't even own the property your house is on. Moving on. Okay, we kind of hit on this last one, I think. Anyway, here's one that was actually kind of a surprise. This was get this, you guys, this was a house, okay, and this is in that Ansley Park area. You can tell how these streets have these big, huge, sweeping radiuses going in there. I took the street names off. And there's variable right-of-ways out there. This is, like I said earlier, this is one of the hardest parts of town to survey in. And notice what's on here. You see this line right here? It was headed right for the house. And it was a good-sized trunk line. I mean, it wasn't your 8-inch line. And this is a $1.4 million tear-down lot. You heard that right. That's a tear-down lot, or tear-down house on this lot in an area that's just super hot. I mean, I don't know why everybody wants to be down there, but they do apparently. But yeah, the house had this 84-year-old woman that just didn't even want us on the property. She kept trying to run us off every time we go out there to survey it, and we were surveying it for her, and she would run us off. She was just not friendly. I think she was kind of crazy. She was actually had gotten to the point where she was having some mental health issues, and she was actually trying to move out of this house and collect, you know, cash out on this house and go to an assisted living place. And anyway, but so yeah, that house, we finally determined that line, you know, because we couldn't tell where it went because the maps weren't very conclusive. Actually, the city maps show this sewer line is curving as if it was a brick tunnel. Normally, the sewer lines do not curve. There's just straight, rigid pipes that don't bend, they don't flex. But some of these really old lines were put in back into the early 1900s, okay? And some of them are actually like a brick tunnel. And some of them, you know, do bend around, these really old ones. Not the current ones, but actually this one bent around to the point where we couldn't even guess where it went. So they brought in a subsurface locate company. I think it cost them like $2,500, and they put a camera in there. And sure enough, if you take this line that we have, this blue line, and continue it through, it just goes right through that northeast corner of the house. Or, yeah, the north corner, the north portion of this house, I should say. So anyway, it was not a good situation for somebody that wants $1.4 million for a vacant lot, because by the time you know, this one just shows the front building line, but by the time you add the current zoning, you'd have this front building line, then you have your side building lines, probably 7-foot side building lines on this one. That's the current zoning in that area. So, but you don't have much of a building envelope left. So this one was took a pretty big hit. In fact, I think it's still sitting there today. Y'all may know where this is, because I had for a long time people say, oh, I know where that one is. That blue tarp's still on the roof. And people were fed up with it because it's an eyesore. The yard wasn't kept up, and the blue tarp was driving the neighbors crazy. All right, throw that in the trash. All right. So this is something that's really, I would say, is the biggest game changer in real estate in 20 years. I mean, really, I don't think that's a big overstatement, because I think that's factual, because what it is it's changed real estate. This right here has actually changed real estate to the point where it's so serious and so kind of under, you know, I guess estimated about the, you know, how that affects the value of these properties that are being bought and sold every day. And these state buffer areas affect tens of thousands of properties in metropolitan Atlanta alone, tens of thousands of properties. And most sellers do not have a clue that they're even there. You know, most owners, property owners, when they're selling their property, they're not going to put it on the seller's disclosure statement. I had that last Friday. I was dealing with that with some people that were flipped out. It was a foreign couple that were buying the property, and their English was not that good. And so, and both the buyer, their English wasn't good, and the real estate agents, her English was not good. It wasn't much better, but it was good enough to where at least I could have a conversation with her. But she kept telling me, she says, my client do not want to see people digging in their backyard. And it's like, well, these are state buffer areas, and I explained to her it's the opposite of that. These state buffers or water areas of restricted areas are just the opposite. It's to restrict people from digging, and that means no digging. You have to remain completely natural. In other words, you need natural vegetation. Whatever trees are there, you leave the same. You don't grade in that area. You don't disturb that area. You basically need to leave it as weeds, is the way it really, you know, is required by the state. People go in and manicure them or cut them, you know, do what they need to do to manage their own property, right? But they do want you to minimize what you're doing, the land disturbance that you're creating in that area, because what it is like these state buffer areas are really basically like little highways or roadways for wildlife. That's what they are. I mean, that's what it is. It's for, you know, any type of animal that you would see in Georgia. They're going to follow these corridors or these roadways, I call them, to survive. That's what they need. You know, whether it be a deer, rabbits. You know, you see squirrels everywhere, but you really see just expanded wildlife in these little areas, because what it is they follow paths for water, you know, and vegetation that you don't see in other places. And that's why it could just be a ditch that's crossing through the neighbor's property. Okay, doesn't even have to be on your client's property. A ditch on the neighbor's property can keep your clients in the future, a year after they buy their house or a month after they buy their house, building a pool in their backyard. And that's what's so surprising. Each county and city regulates these totally differently. Like Cobb County is very lax. DeKalb is just the total opposite. They're like the extreme buffer Nazis, I call them, or the extreme buffer Gestapo. So that's what's so surprising, is how all over the board this is, and each county and city, or, you know, they're the ones that actually monitor these things and actually regulate them. So if you've got a piece of property and you've got, say, the whole backyard is in a stream buffer area, and you're wanting to put in a pool back there, what you have to do is apply for a stream buffer variance. And it's 50-50. I don't know if you're going to get it approved or not. I was actually teaching a class over at Drake Realty about a year and a half ago in Buckhead, and it was like 50 people in the room. It was a big audience. They even gave me a microphone. I felt pretty cool. And anyway, so I was working this class or doing this class, and at the end of it, this lady went up to me And she said, wow, I appreciate you talking to us about the stream buffer issue because that is huge. And I've always known real estate agents don't have a focus on that like they should. They don't even understand it at all. Most of them don't have a clue what that even means when you talk, say the word stream buffer, So she said she actually was in the city of Milton. She lived in Milton. She was actually on the board that has to approve or deny stream buffer variances. And she was actually one of the board people. I think she told me, best I remember, she said there was 5 of them that were on the board, and that she reviewed, a lot of these cases where people would apply for a variance. And she said, what you said is exactly right, and I've always thought it's kind of hard to claim a hardship to build a swimming pool. She verified that. She said, you're exactly right. Unless you've got a handicapped son or daughter that needs a pool, for some kind of therapy, it's kind of hard to justify that as a hardship. So they do take them serious, but they also, at the same time, they understand that they've encumbered this property by this easement area or restricted area. I would also call it more of a restricted area than an easement, but it's still an area that affects the property. And to me, it affects the value of the property. And that's what's so understated about all this, because if you've got a property that's just, say, 50% of your backyard is consumed or, taken out by a stream buffer area, you really can't do much with your own property. So I would think that could affect the value of the property. So that's one thing that surprises a lot of people, is how many areas or how big that is, because we're talking about, and I'll show you this. So when you think about stream buffers, here's what, just human instinct's gonna make you think, okay, well, yeah, here we go. See the picture here? That's a stream buffer area, obviously, well, it could be a river, it could be a stream, it could be a creek, a branch, it could be a well, lakes, reservoirs, ponds, but these bottom two are the ones that really scare us. It's the springs and drainage features, okay? What exactly is a drainage feature? Well, let me show you. If you go to the state website, we pulled this off of, it's kind of a fuzzy picture, but we pulled it off that state website photo, and so here's what they gave as an illustration of a possible stream buffer area, okay? What does that look like? Does that look like a stream to you? No, that's a ditch. It's a dry ditch, and in uncertain conditions, thered be water going in there half the year, maybe, typically, or there might be water in there every time a big storm comes up, or, they look at it like, does this drain down into what they consider as what's called as a mainstream basin? And that's what they're looking for. Where does this drainage area go to? What does that go to? Is that going into a creek, or a creek that, that eventually flows into the Chattahoochee? So that's what they're looking at, is where does that ditch run to? And I had one just like this. I mean, that ditch looked exactly like this. And one of the heirs to the Coca-Cola fortune was actually trying to cut out he had a 7-acre parcel of land in Buckhead, and they realized, this big mansion that they were having a hard time selling had a lot of extra land to it. And so they were trying to cut out a 1-acre tract of land in Buckhead because, that was the zoning. It was required to have a minimum of 1 acre. And so what they did was they had us come out, survey enough of the 7 acres to create a 1-acre cutout from the original where the mansion was located. I think it was built in the 1920s. And so we cut out this 1-acre tract of land. Well, in the middle of this 1-acre tract of land that we cut out or created for them, it had something that looked almost identical to this. That's all it was. And so, they submitted all the plans to the city of Atlanta, and we put notes on it. In fact, you'll see this on our surveys. It said stream buffer may apply. Well, they took it to the city of Atlanta, and the stream buffer would apply. It did apply, and they said, look, this area drains down into a floodplain area. This wasn't in the flood. The property wasn't in the flood, but it drained down into one. And they said that they considered that a mainstream basin, and that there was a lot of water based on their big quad maps that they have. They look at this large aerial topography maps, and they determined there's so much water going through here that they needed to, basically contain that area in a stream buffer and leave it in its natural state. And the guy, it was Coca-Cola heir, okay? And so he said, look, I've got connections downtown, and I can probably fix this. Just give me a little time. Well, it's been over 2 years, y'all. Hadn't heard a peep out of him. What he eventually did, what I did here find out, is he sold that tract of land to the neighbor. The neighbor bought it for green space, and he never could get his clearance from the city of Atlanta on that. So they do take it kind of serious sometimes, or most of the time. They just look at each one individually. But anytime you've got one, excuse me, that you're not sure about, what we like to do is pull first. One of the first things we'll do if we see a ditch or just a small creek on a piece of property, we'll pull up the county or the city GIS maps. And what they've been doing now, you guys, lately, is they'll show a blue line across that. It's just a little squiggly line. In fact, we use that a lot. In fact, here's one right here that we did. If y'all can see the blue line on that. And then the yellow line is actually the stream buffer area, and you see the dark blue line's actually the border of the lot. It's basically this whole vacant lot is encumbered by a stream buffer. So it pretty much wipes out this lot. It's not even a buildable lot. But that's what we're looking for, is just different things, to kind of determine. So we'll do the field work, locating the ditch, and then the top of the ditch, and that's where these measurements come from. So here's an example of it. So we have your defined channel. We don't care about that, but here's the rested vegetation line. So technically, the way that this state law is written, we have to measure from the rested vegetation line, and it's a plus or minus line. So keep that in mind. You could argue that by 2 feet easily. Hopefully it's not that much, but in certain cases, you could argue where exactly it is. So it's not a real exact measurement based on what you're having to measure from. It'd be a lot better if they just in the center of the creek. Well, that'd be too easy. So we're talking about the government here, state government here, but so we're measuring, you guys, from this dark blue line, and so we're measuring 25 feet out. And there's basically 2 buffers here. There's your state mandated buffer, which is 25 feet, and by state law, each county and city can add up to an additional 50 feet to it. Guess what? In the metropolitan Atlanta, they all have. So it's a 75-foot buffer. So you got the 25-foot, then you've got the extra 50-foot that goes over. You're talking about, total from each side of this creek, 150-foot wide area with 75 and 75 on each side, plus whatever this is between, rested vegetation point from point to point there. That could vary by quite a bit. It depends on the width of that creek or ditch. So you're talking about a lot of areas that are affected by this. Now here's one example of it. So here was a vacant lot that we surveyed, and we just surveyed a lot that had frontage on both. What is that? I think that's Brantley Street, and then Spink Street here. And so the house was going to front this other street up here. I think it was Brantley, and in the back it was like a big gully back there. And so, but it looks okay here, right? So let's take a look one more time. Let's see what it really looks like, because the city of Atlanta looked at it and they looked at their quad maps. Remember, I talked about that a minute ago. They looked at their big quad maps and they saw all this water draining down into the back of this lot back here from the whole area. So they're looking at, how the land is sloped for, probably, 500 or 600 feet or more. And it's draining down into this backyard. And the backyard was really almost like a gully, you guys. And so here, this little ditch that we found when we surveyed it, well, the city of Atlanta goes out there and they inspected it. And at the time they went out there, it was actually a spring. So it turned into a spring all of a sudden, which, those are intermittent. Sometimes it's a spring, sometimes it's just dry. But here's what they located and determined as a spring, and they were requiring a buffer on it. So here's your top of bank. See how crazy that is? It's just all over the place, but that's the way it measures out or locates on the ground. Here's your 25-foot state mandated buffer, and then here's the 75-foot buffer, okay? And so here's your proposed house and proposed pool. Looks a lot different now, And so this lady that bought it, she was a builder, and she just freaked out. Okay, so she applied for the variance. Anybody know, did she get it? Anybody got a guess?
I'm gonna guess that.
Thanks, Karen. Can we set a timer? Let's see if somebody else will chime in. Okay. Yeah, she actually claimed a hardship, you guys, and got it. You know, claiming that they've basically made this property that was quite valuable. They deemed it to be a unbuildable lot, and so she, claimed the hardship based on that, and she actually got approval to build a house. Now, I don't think the pool is back there. They probably didn't grant the variance for the pool, but what they do when they give you these variances, they limit your footprint of your construction. In other words, they say if you want to build a 4,000 square foot house or structure in that variance or in that, that buffer area, they may say, well, you can only build a 3,000 square foot, structure there. And so they actually need you to make it as small as possible and minimize the impervious surfaces that are within that 50-foot area. Now, keep in mind, the 50-foot area, they have jurisdiction of it to either grant, approvals or not, for construction. The 25-foot area is state mandated, and you're not going to get a variance for that. So just keep that in mind. I say not. I mean, I'm sure there's some exceptions, but there's not, that many, variances that I've ever seen approved for that 25-foot area. All right, here's one. This is residential. So say you could have a guy, and this is a pretty good example of that. You have different people view this differently, okay, that are, buyers. Buyers can look at it totally different. This is one where you actually had this little tiny creek in the back. They didn't even know it was back there. You couldn't really see it for all the vegetation back there in the back of the lot. And so that might be one way of looking at this. Sometimes, the agents, they don't know that there's something even back there. But when you see a wall of vegetation, what does that tell you? Well, there's water back there too, probably, is what that kind of tells you. And so it's one of those things where that was hiding that little ditch or creek back there. And so all of a sudden they're realizing, hey, they are going to have to show this as a stream buffer. It's actually flowing water. If it's a ditch, it's variable, depends on, what the county maps are showing. This was actually a flowing, creek back there. It was quite small, but it's still flowing. And then, so here's your 25-foot buffer. And then here's the state mandated buffer. Okay. And this was a house that's probably built in I think it was built in the early 90s. All right. Well, that would have been fine in the early 90s. This is the state buffer law was passed in 2005. So keep that in mind. So it depends on when it was built. If it was built prior to 2005, it's grandfathered in. So grandfathered in is great until you want to come back in and redevelop that lot. Then your grandfathering, goes away. And so on this one, I talked to the buyer on this one, and when I talk to a buyer of a property like this, when it's got a buffer issue, one of my main things that I try to make sure I maintain my voice tone and don't get too excited and don't put any kind of spin on it whatsoever. I'm just telling them the facts. Keep it real neutral in my description of it, where I can make sure I don't scare them to death. Because it's not my job to scare them away from buying a property. That's for sure. And so what I told him or explained to him, and this was the day before the closing, he said, look, he called me back later after I just described it, to him as being just an area that he, just meant he wasn't going to be able to build an addition onto the back of his house, not to mention a pool, but yeah, you couldn't even add onto the back of this house without getting a stream buffer variance approved, which you might could do on this one. But he called me back the next day and said, well, I'm going to go ahead and close on it. I'm buying this house as an investment, and I don't really care if I can add on to the back of it or not. He said, I'm getting a really good deal on it. And so he went ahead and closed on it. So these aren't always deal killers when you've got a situation like this. And so it just depends on, the particular client and what their concerns are. Everybody's different when it comes to this. And actually, you got to also weigh in the pros. It's not just, negative things that are associated with these buffers, you guys. There's actually some positives with it. It means that it's going to remain natural back there in a backyard. So you could have a whole backyard in a stream buffer area, and what it means is you probably have more privacy between your neighbors. Say if it's on the side of the house instead of the back, and you've got your neighbors kind of right there on top of you. Well, in time that'll grow up into a nice natural area to where you're not going to see them probably. But yeah, keep that in mind. It just remains natural. I mean, they won't be building anything there. So there's some positive things to these buffers for sure, as far as, you know, the way the home buyer might view it. All right, here's one. Let's see. This one, you guys, I think I told you already that DeKalb County is like the worst. They're like the stream buffer Gestapo. They're awful. And so here's one that we had done for this lady. And she was actually building onto, you know, the back of her house. It was a small house, and Grandma was coming to move in with them, okay? And so she was doing this big addition onto the back of her house, and she'd had an architect lay out this new proposed addition onto the back of her house. And so to do this, she had to get approval from DeKalb County to get started for construction. And so this was part of her proposed site plan. And so when you see this little addition here, looks fine, looks like it's okay, until all of a sudden DeKalb County looks at it and they pull up their maps, and you see lot 5 here to the south of our lot. We have this little thing right here, a ditch. That's all it was. It was going through the middle of the neighbor's backyard, not even, you know, on the edge. It's really, that's kind of the middle of their lot back there. And DeKalb County said, look, you're going to need to have the surveyor go back out there and locate that ditch on the neighbor's property, not even a creek, it was a ditch, and show it as a buffer. And so we did. We went back out there. All of a sudden, we're showing the top of the bank. Here's your 25-foot state buffer. And here's the 50-foot county-controlled buffer area. And so we were pretty excited when all of a sudden, if you look at this again, see that line? It goes right at the corner of that house there, but not through it. So it hits that corner, and we were thinking, oh, hey, man, that is luck. We're in good shape here. DeKalb County said, no, not so fast there, guys. You see these thin dashed lines with these X's on it here? That is actually, it looks like a fence. Typically, a fence is going to be shown like that on a survey. Well, in this case, this is a proposed site plan showing a sediment barrier, and that's what this is down here. You see it a little lower down there. The sediment barrier actually has to be in place there going around that structure and construction area to protect it. We'll see that those thin lines with the X's actually encroach into the additional 50-foot buffer area and goes down into it by quite a bit. They said no. DeKalb County denied this one, and they made her apply for a stream buffer variance because of that. So, and the way they look at it, the way they viewed it, you'll be sending bobcats and multiple construction crews coming around that house, just back and forth, trampling down that natural vegetation area, which in this case, y'all, was just some grass and some weeds. There wasn't even much there. But yeah, that's how hardcore they can be on these things. So, yeah, I was kind of surprised by that one, because I thought, well, that's like a little over the top there, you know. Looked like they could have given her an administrative variance for that. All right, does anybody know what you're looking at in this backyard? What are we looking at back here? So it's got all these lines going through this thing, little wormy-looking lines. What is that? What kind of survey is this, you guys? Anybody got a guess? Any hands?
Is that like typography or topography?
Yeah, topography, yep. Yep, that's a topography survey. So it's actually a boundary survey with a topography survey overlaid on top of this. And these are the topo contour lines, okay? And so we just did the backyard. So to save money, we're just topo in the back. We didn't do the front because there wasn't really much going on or construction-wise in the front. So we were trying to help, you know, because these people didn't have a lot of money. They definitely didn't have the $3,500 they needed to apply for this stream buffer variance. But luckily, Grandma had some money to actually, you know, put in some serious money to build this addition. But look at this. I can show you how to read a topo. This is kind of cool, y'all. I bet nobody here knows, well, okay, maybe one or two of you are going to know how to read a topography map. All right, so let's learn how to read a topo real quick. This will take like probably 2 minutes, if that. All right, so do you see the line going through up here at the top of the page where lot 3 is? And you've got that line, that dark line coming right in towards that carport area, and it says 920, and there's a dark line. Karen, you can talk to me. You see that?
Yes.
920, okay.
And sadly, I have experience because my brother studied topography, so.
Oh, you're cheating then. Okay.
Yeah, Karen has an advantage, not fair.
Have an advantage.
Yeah.
That's what he got his degree in at UGA, so.
That's pretty cool, and I didn't know that. Okay, so there's 920. That's kind of the bold line. All right, then so the next line going to the left of the page, you guys, going to the west, okay, is another distance there, a little number, and it's small, and it's what, 918. Okay, then you go 916, keep going to the left, you got 914, you got 912, you got 910. Okay, and see that little squiggly line? The 910 is a bold, so every 10 feet, you have a bold line, and there is basically what it's called is this is a 2-foot topo, so it's in 2-foot contour intervals, okay? And so you have a 2-foot topo. What is this backyard doing? Is it going up or is it going down?
Downhill.
Yep, going downhill. It's dropping, and it's dropping fairly fast, okay? And so it's dropping off, so it shows the water all should be running downhill. So if you ever get a client walk in your door and wants you to look at a survey, and hey, next time you can look at it and say, oh, it looks like all this water's going this way, you know, and they're pretty easy to read. You just got to kind of not be afraid to look at it, you know, and talk about it. But keep this in mind, you guys. So if you see a topo survey or topography survey and the lines are spread really far apart, what does that tell you? You have lines, they're very far apart, okay?
Flatter.
Versus one that's real tight where it's just, yes, exactly. It's flat. It's a lot flatter or more gradual. Yeah. And if you see a topo survey where these lines are all jammed in there and there are a bunch of tiny little squiggly lines close together, that means you're looking at a really steep piece of property. And that's not something a surveyor ever wants to see, but we see them, you know. But so, yeah, it makes it real hilly and more challenging to develop. So keep that in mind. Yeah, so y'all can read a topo map like that now, okay? They're easy to read.
Can I ask a question?
Keep that in mind about how the topo lines are spread out or close together. Yes?
So, okay, so you said that it's showing that it's going downhill towards the house. How do you see that? Because to me, I would almost think it was going uphill, because of the numbers increasing towards the house. Well,
what it is falling off in the back. See this 920. Well, I'm glad you kind of said that, because it made me also listen. Is okay. So see above sea level. So these surveys, when you're tying in topography and showing topography on surveys, gotcha, they have to be tied to sea level. Okay, so it's 920 feet above sea level. And as you go down, you're going also down. What are we going but down to, you guys in the back, going across the back of this lot? Y'all see that line?
It's not going towards that creek.
Well, it's not really going towards that creek or that ditch. It's going more towards that sewer line back there. Y'all see the sewer line?
Right.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. So it's draining down. Sewers are normally built in the low portion of the property. Okay. And so, yeah, that's just a sewer line crossing the back of the property there. And what are these little popcorn-looking things that you see on this topography map?
Oh,
is that a good way to describe them?
Vegetation, maybe, like plants?
Not plants, but trees. You were close.
Okay.
They are plants. Okay, you were exactly right. Okay, let's rephrase that. You were right. But it was a tree. So surveyors are locating main trees. Okay, so whenever we do a topography map or a topo that's going to be submitted to the county or the city, they typically are wanting what we call 6 and 10. So it's 6 inches and up on the hardwoods. You know, any hardwood tree, they want 6 inches. This is a 6-inch diameter, or 10 inches and up on poplars or softwood trees. You know, so pines and poplars, we're going to locate those 10 inches and up. So that's how we do these topos. We're only locating the main trees on the property. So that's something that just, you know, so it just helps give you confidence in looking at surveys, so you can just kind of chit-chat it up with a client. They walk in your door with the closing and want you to look at a survey with them. It kind of, you know, makes them realize, you know, hey, you know what you're talking about. You know, you're not foreign to these surveys, you know, so don't be afraid of them. But yeah, this one was surprising that they actually denied her permit just because that small little triangle was encroaching into that stream buffer area. It shows you how serious it can be. All right, so state waters, you know, basically the functions of them are, you guys, but it's protect the environment, you know, and keep from overdevelopment. You know, that's why they have these stream buffers, and they're there for a good reason. If you really think about it, at first I used to think that was just way too invasive or too big, to have a 150-foot wide area that's restricted. And now, as time's gone on, I've kind of gotten accustomed to them. I realize, and especially since I have one close by me where I actually, every night when I walk my dog, I walk through a stream buffer area, you guys, and it's about 150 foot wide, and we see all kinds of vegetation, or vegetation within that, and I see all kinds of animals coming and going right through there, anywhere from a possum. I've even seen evidence of apparently it was either a fox or a coyote that was in there. It's probably a coyote because it had partially eaten a deer that they'd caught in that thing. But we just see all kinds of wildlife inside those buffer areas, and you realize those are really little roadways or corridors for wildlife to travel and to thrive in our environment. So we're kind of encroaching into the area. So they're trying to minimize overdevelopment, or trying to, keep that down as much as they can. And if you also think about it, it's also minimizes pollution draining into these stream basin areas, because, as you're fertilizing your lawns and putting out weed killers and stuff like that, that's draining down into that, into those stream basin, which is eventually draining down into, large bodies of water at some point, So that's what they're for. But so it's just knowing that, hey, you can help explain these to your clients sometimes and maybe help them with it, to keep them from buying something that they don't really understand anything about. And you want to make sure you know what they look like on a survey. Here's an example. This came from the state website, actually. There was one example that they used where they'd find a guy for violating the stream buffer area and encroaching into it. They fined him $40,000. I had one experience with a guy by the name of Bob Docking, where he encroached into an area. He actually got a big track hoe, and he was digging along the edge of a creek, and the city of Atlanta caught him and gave him a citation for it. He had to go to court, and he had to write him a check for $13,000. He was not happy. All right, so here's one. Keep in mind, you guys, stream buffers are not going to be shown on these old surveys. So here's a great example of an older survey. And if you're looking at it, once you look at it and realize how this has all changed over time, okay, so you may look at this and go, oh, this is a pretty new subdivision. It's not that old. I think this one, best I remember, is in Alpharetta, and it's already got the buffer shown on it. Well, make sure you look at it, and look at it, a second time maybe. What are we looking at here, you guys? We're looking at two buffers on this one. There's one in the front, and here's one in the back, okay? But what does it say? Older plats, like this one, they may only show a 25-foot buffer, okay? But what is it now? What have we been talking about? The new requirements are, and basically, you guys, you got to remember, this has evolved and changed over time. And so when the law first passed in 2005, they were just, all these counties and cities, they were scared to death of it, and they didn't know how to manage it and how to require engineers and developers to, to actually show it on their subdivision plat. So to start with, they showed a 25-foot state mandated buffer. But now, after they've all gotten kind of comfortable with it and realized, how important this really is for, just to protect, Atlanta and then runoff in the future and overdevelopment, to where you don't have, huge drainage areas, problems, or drainage erosion areas, because this kind of snowballs and it keeps getting bigger and bigger as it drains and goes across concrete, so the more you develop these lots, the worse it could get downstream. So now they're really enforcing that 75-foot buffer everywhere. So here's what this one looks like with current conditions. It's a little different. So that looks a little different, doesn't it? So basically, if your clients were trying to buy this property for a pool, not sure where you're going to build it. Maybe you could do a rooftop pool, I don't know. Or you could take out that side of the garage. You got a little spot right there where this, where you pull into your garage. I guess that's a place you could tear that out, put in a pool there. Or maybe just get you an above ground pool. Now here's a pretty interesting lot. Here's one that actually, I'd say this one's got about every easement I've ever seen on the lot. This guy was actually buying 3.4 acres. Yeah, 3 point something acres. And the closing attorney talked him into getting a survey at the last minute because he was buying such a large lot. He thought, well, you know, it's plenty big enough to do what I want to do, and what I'm trying to do here is build my dream house, okay? So he's going to build this huge, massive dream house on this 3+ acres here, and this was in Forsyth County. So here you go. Here's what he was actually buying, and luckily the attorney stepped in and talked him into getting a survey. So the green is your building envelope, your building lines. This line going through here that says 1006 and 1011. That's actually not anything. That's your land lot line. Most of y'all know what that is. But here's your building envelope right here going through that area. So there's your whole big building envelope for your dream house right there, okay? And so what he actually was buying was a nice little building site for maybe a nice double wide. I'm not so sure about a full-size dream house because I don't think it fit, even though he had 3 acres. This was probably got about every kind of easement I've ever seen, including a sinkhole going through it. I don't know if y'all see that on there. It's that brown area. But yeah, this has kind of got quite a lot of easements on it. So that's probably why it was the last lot in the subdivision, just sitting out there waiting on some happy home buyer or property buyer. Here's one that's interesting, you guys. Okay, this one. This was actually the president of, I don't know if I can say this. Is it a bank president? No, yeah, he was actually the bank president. And I don't know if I should show the name, but okay, so he's buying this vacant lot, $420-something lot, vacant lot. It's in the Buckhead area, which is not a bad deal for a vacant lot in Buckhead. But anyway, he was buying it from a builder. And the builder wasn't going to build on it, but he was just going to sell him that vacant lot that he already owned. It was a little suspicious right there. So anyway, he's buying this. He gets a survey, passed the due diligence. Well, guess what? They were all sitting at the closing table. One person was missing at the closing. The buyer didn't show up for his own closing. And here's the bank president. Why did he not show up for his own closing? Check this out. So this is a topographical survey, as you can see, with the topo lines on it. Here's your city of Atlanta buffer based on this creek that was going along the whole property line, south property line there. So here's his building envelope. That was the area to build on. And so once he got uploaded the survey and realized, you know, he was buying potentially an unbuildable lot for $400-something thousand. So he naturally did not show up for his own closing. And so there was a lawsuit. Well, they were filing, the two sides were filing paperwork back and forth. I don't know if they formally ever filed a lawsuit. And I was actually teaching a class over at Harry Norman. And the broker came running up to me in the middle of the class, in the middle of my class with all these agents out there. And the broker for this particular, you know, office location said, oh, I know all about this one. This was our deal. And he runs back into his office and comes in with this folder this thick of paperwork, manila folder with papers just jammed in it, back and forth, where the attorneys were filing motions back and forth or making complaints about, you know, what each side did. And he said it got nasty for quite a while with the buyer wanting to get his earnest money back. And he did tell me something I didn't know about. He said, yeah, eventually this bank president, the guy that y'all know the name of this mortgage company, I guarantee you, they're one of the top 5 mortgage companies in Atlanta, I guess, top 10 for sure. But he said, yeah, they finally got their earnest money back because the builder, again, you know, was selling this property, and they felt like he should have known about this. In fact, he did know about it. So they kind of, I think they nailed him on that finally, that he did know about it, and he was just selling it. Instead of him building on it, he decided he'd flip it to somebody. So anyway, Karen, how much time have we got?
We are pretty much done, but if everybody wants to continue, I say continue. Let me ask Margaret. Margaret?
Okay. Oh, Margaret, I just got an email here, or a message. I've got the 5-minute warning.
Oh.
Okay, so I've got time to do this. Okay, so elevation certificates, you guys, okay? And this could be commercial, this could be residential, But when you see one of these forms, you guys, okay, so this is what an elevation certificate or elevation survey looks like, okay? And what it is it's got all this stuff on it. It looks pretty scary, okay? It's got all these numbers on it and, you know, different areas that, you know, you can zoom in on. And really the only things you need to verify or really look at on a form like this, on these elevation certificates, is one, you know, first off, I would say verify that it's your property address, you know, for your clients, okay? And then look down under B9 here. You see it highlighted up at the top, kind of on the right-hand side or towards the top, and you've got an elevation number. And what that number is that's based on the FEMA flood maps, okay? The FEMA flood maps give you the 100-year flood elevation, and you see over to the right of that, just to the right of that, it says this is in flood zone AE. Okay, so that's basically a 100-year flood designation, and so that is an area that you're going to see mostly in Atlanta. You know, they have different zones in different parts of the country, but basically in Atlanta you only have 3 zones. You have zone AE, which is a defined elevation in Atlanta, and then you have zone A, which is undefined. Okay, so that means, well, it gets kind of complicated, but so you don't want to get into zone A, okay, just zone A by itself. So if you have a client that's in a zone AE, that's probably a good thing overall, because what can be done is one of these forms that you're looking at. So you could always recommend your clients, you know, get an elevation certificate if they've got a piece of property that's in the flood zone. And what it will do is to find exactly where that house or structure is in relation to the 100-year flood, okay? And so this property has a 100-year flood elevation of 776. Can somebody read that? Is that 0.5? Doesn't matter. Well, let's say 776.0, okay? And then you go down. The only other number on this whole form, I think that's important in my mind, you know, is this one, and it's called the lowest adjacent grade, okay? And so if you picture, you know, houses in Georgia are not on a flat piece of property 90% of the time. And so you've got a certain portion of the house that's going to be at the lowest point where the dirt hits the house, okay? And that's typically going to be where you walk out for the basement, or a crawl space where you go into the crawl space. That's called the lowest adjacent grade of dirt adjoining or abutting the house, okay? And so on this particular one, it's 760. So we got the lowest adjacent grade of 760, and this is cool if y'all know how to do this, okay? And then you've got the flood elevation, the 100-year flood elevation is 776. So you got 776, and then the lowest adjacent grade is 760 touching this house. What's it going to do, you guys? We definitely could give away a prize. Hey, I got a free round of golf for somebody that can figure this one out real quick. Yeah, free round. Mark, you're paying for it, babe. Oh, I know I'm getting in trouble now. Anybody?
Nobody so far.
Nobody. Well, nobody wants to play golf with me, I think probably what it is. I don't know. Anyway, okay, so let's look at it, you guys. Here's the little chart. Hey, this house is going to could flood all the way up to little Jimmy's bedroom upstairs on the 2nd floor, okay? That's your base flood elevation of 776. Here's your lowest adjacent grade down here. So here's the elevation of the lowest part of the house, and the blue line is the 100-year flood elevation. Not good. And I would say you could look like this real quick. Don't go there. Run, okay? So you got permission just to get in the car, burn some rubber, get down the driveway, get out of there. And actually, this is actually from Real Elevation certificate that we did, and this is actually one on, I think it was Peachtree Creek or Nancy Creek, I can't remember now. But actually, Peachtree Creek and Nancy Creek, you guys, that actually can flood in certain places, it can flood up to 27 feet. That's a lot. Well, we don't have time to go over this one. Well, let's do. I hadn't been given the axe yet, Okay, so here's one. I was doing a class one day over at Keller Williams in Buckhead, and this lady that had her license a total of 6 months, you guys, was selling a house. And this was, my classes are on Thursday. Typically, I was doing this class on a Thursday afternoon. She was telling me, oh, well, I go under contract on this particular lot, tomorrow at 3 o'clock, we're going to meet and sign the contract. And so she said, a lot of things you talked about, you know, I'm wondering if this would affect my property or that I'm fixing to go into contract, because she saw the creek in the backyard. She had no clue what it meant, no clue. And so I looked it up for her for free. You know, this is, you know, again, this is, I give agents just free support. And so once I pulled the information and I pulled the recorded plat, she had these sewer easements that run all the way through the lot. Okay, see these sewer easements in red, and then you see the building line, the 30-foot building setback line. Now, we didn't survey this property, you guys. We never made it that far. I'm not sure it went under contract, but so she had, you see the 30-foot building line, you see the edge of the sewer easement. So between the building line and that edge of sewer for the easement, I'm pretty sure there's not room for a house there, but for it to be, it's gonna have to be over the front setback line, that 30-foot building line, or it'd have to be in the easement, sitting in that sewer easement. And on top of that, you see the blue line, that's your 100-year flood line, because that particular property was in the floodplain. I just checked that out for her too while I was helping her. And then that other green line is your buffer line. So you had a flood line going somewhere through the middle of the house. Looks like the buffer line would be going in front of the house. And the agent said to me, once I disclosed all this to her, she said, oh, I wonder if that's why this is the cheapest house in the neighborhood. I thought, well, that's a good start. It's a good chance, you know, so I'm not so sure I would offer the same amount of money for it that you might have been offering for it yesterday. Today, I think that would make a serious, you know, hit on this total amount your clients would be willing to offer it, if they'd be willing to offer anything for it. You know, to me, I wouldn't want to buy it at any price. You know, I think I would run from this one. So that's the kind of support we give agents, and we can give that to you guys if you ever need it. And I'm sorry, most of this is in residential. My partner, Mike Knowles, is the commercial guru, and really, to be honest with you, he's kind of like Bruce and Brian. I mean, that's his forte. I mean, Bruce and Brian have a ton of experience in the commercial world, and Mike Knowles, my business partner, does too. He's just phenomenal. He can go through a stack of title exceptions and you know, title notes this thick, you know, run through those deeds quicker than anybody I've ever seen, and actually map them all out on the survey. And he's just really, you know, good at it. I don't know how he does it so fast and efficient, but yeah, commercial is, a lot of it's the same stuff. You guys is just, you know, applying it in a different format on these plats, you know, in your Alta versus the non-Alta layout, you know, the way that we put them onto these drawings. You know, there's certain things that you have to put on every Alta survey. One of the things you want to also make sure you're always asking for is on an Alta survey, if they're requiring Alta, you need them to actually, and we'll handle this for you, make sure that that's done right, but you need your client to actually, you know, check with the title company and the lender to see which particular Alta, you know, standards they want, you know, because there's a whole list. It's a 2-page list of things that, you know, that you can check off. You know, like some things like, you know, insurance things are optional. You've got topography is optional on it, building heights, the zoning, all these, you know, every couple of years, I'm pretty sure it's every couple of years, they actually change the Alta requirements and how they're written and what things have to be added on surveys and the way that they're added. One of the most significant changes on Alta surveys is the zoning. They always used to put that off onto the surveyor, and they've kind of gotten away from that now because they realize the surveyor, you know, really can't do some of that, you know, as far as the zoning and how that's always written, you know, because it's kind of variable and it's the way you interpret the zoning regulations, you know. So anytime you've got a question on that, you might want to ask Mike Knowles about it because he really is quite good at commercial, or Brian or Bruce, you know. So anyway, so I guess, hey, Karen, is that, think we're good for today?
Yes.
Okay.
Margaret?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
We can hear you.
All right.
Did I get in trouble? Am I in trouble for anything?
Of course you are.
Sorry.
But I'm glad that you admitted in front of our audience that you do know how to maintain that tone.
Oh, yeah. I try to control it.
I get on to him all the time about that. Don't take that tone.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. We appreciate it. You did a great job, and I hope everybody enjoyed it. And even though we had to keep everybody muted, Karen, if you want to check the chat line, or if anybody has any questions, raise your hand and we will make sure Karen unmutes you to ask.
All right, well, that's it for me, you guys. And if you want to, you can always email me with questions. You know, the best thing is to email my office. It's MSS for McClung Surveying Services. So MSS@McClungSurveying.com, McClungSurveying.com. And keep in mind, trust me, you don't have to send me a survey. You don't have to, you know, worry about that. Send me somebody else's survey. You know, definitely willing to look at those and help people with those, even if it was a survey that was just done 2 months ago. I don't care. Trust me, we have so much work that we're doing right now. I'd be glad to help you for free, and it doesn't, you know, need to be a survey that we're going to be doing tied to you in the future. Even it does not matter to me. So I'd love to help you. So keep it in mind, you know, that I'm here to support you, and we can help you with any questions you may have in the form of legal descriptions, because I know that was one of the questions that we got from yesterday's classes. You know, these legal descriptions can kind of throw you off sometimes the way that they're written. The old legal versus the new one, and we'll be glad to help you with that, okay? All right, that's it for me. Bye.
All right. Thanks, everybody.